Coming up.
So, Ms. Reza, what instructions have you been given by Minister Duclos or any other minister or the Prime Minister or the PMO's office in terms of recovery efforts?
Quick question,
fraud,
Mr. McCauley.
Why is this not going directly to the RCMP and the money being demanded back immediately instead of a negotiation?
So
can I ask, is the Globe and Mail your usual source for information about who is and is not considered to be eligible for certain procurement programs?
How did you distinguish between working with potential fraudsters and those individuals that you referred directly to the RCMP?
These groups across the whole breadth of government have been billing for services not provided, and every department is just cutting checks.
But I guess I can ask anyone at PSPC here, has anyone been suspended or fired in relation to the mishandling of the ArriveCAN scandal? Yes or no?
Contractors either defrauding government or being completely negligent, in which case they should be fired.
have you been contacted by the RCMP at all?
This Guy's Garage. Like and subscribe.
The committee is continuing its study on Report 1, ArriveCAN, sent to the committee on Monday, February 12, 2024.
All our witnesses from the Office of the Auditor General, Karen Hogan, Auditor General of Canada. Nice to see you again. Andrew Hayes, Deputy Auditor General as well. Good to have you back, sir. And Sami Hamouche, Principal. You've been in before. Good to see you again. And from the Department of Public Works and Government Services, Deputy Minister Ariane Reza. Nice to see you again. I know you've also been here previously, so nice to have you and your team back. Catherine Poulin, Assistant Deputy Minister, Departmental Oversight Branch, and Dominique Laporte, Senior Assistant Deputy Minister, Procurement Branch. Good to see you as well. Hogan, we'll
Point
kick
of order,
off.
Chair.
Oh, just 1 second, please, Ms. Hogan. We'll come right back to you.
Mr. Chair, today an explosive story hit from the Le Journal de Montréal. Headline reads, Minister Guilbeault holds financial interest in a firm linked to a controversial federal fund. His office flatly refuses to give details on the subject. As we all know, Minister Guilbeault has held a financial interest in Cycle Capital. Cycle Capital has received well over $600 million from the scandalous Green Slush Fund. He holds a financial interest as a minister. This committee passed a motion on October 7th, 2024. I'm asking for an update, Mr. Chair. Has he accepted our invitation to attend? He's got a lot of questions to answer. If he refuses to answer in the press, he will not be able to use that excuse here at committee.
Thank you, Mr. Brock. I'll provide just a brief update. So we have, the clerk and I have extended the committee's motion and request for the Environment Minister to appear. He has yet to do so. We have sent reminders, and we have made the committee available on dates of his choosing, but we have not heard a response in the affirmative yet.
Thank you, Chair. What we are talking about today, at least from my perspective, is the ongoing examination, prosecution of the ArriveCAN scandal. It clearly exposed the failures of Canada's broken procurement system and the fraudulent misuse of hard-earned taxpayer funds. One consistent response I get from Canadians from coast to coast is they're demanding accountability, they're demanding consequences, and they're demanding recovery. So it is those two latter points, consequences and recovery, which would be the focus of my first round of questions. Ms. Reza, Deputy Minister Reza, you've appeared numerous times at this committee and also government operations. A question was put to you when you appeared last June at government operations with respect to the total cases of contracting fraud that had been referred to lawful authorities, particularly the RCMP. I have your response to that particular question, and you said, we have previously referred many fraudulent overbilling cases from 2022, 2023, 2024 to the RCMP, but it was devoid of details. So I'm asking you if you could explain what you meant about we have previously referred many cases. What does that mean? Can you give me a number, please?
I certainly will, and I want to give you, thank you very much for your question, Mr. Chair, a baseline. The procurement system in the Government of Canada, both at PSPC and more broadly, does about 400,000 procurement transactions. So those are contracts and contracts amendments. Since 2022, under the auspices of PSPC, we've started to use data analytical and mining approaches to be able to look at contracting data. Since that time, and I think that we'll have to break it into two, at that time when I indicated the ones that had been referred, it was 4 cases that had been referred. That was from 2022. We provided in camera to OGO the names that were referred to RCMP.
Okay.
Since that time, there's been 3 further referrals in October to the RCMP for similar overbilling to the Government of Canada.
Okay, so that's 7 in total?
That is correct.
Okay, and that's for the year 2024, or does that include that years from 2022 to 2024?
It includes everything that we found since 2022. We're
Okay.
constantly looking, but this is what's been found to date.
All right. You gave us the names. There was a little bit of pushback, I believe, particularly from Ms. Poulin. There was some pushback. Eventually, you gave us the names. I would like the names then of those additional 4 referrals. If you have that information now, please share. If you need to table it at a later date, I'll allow you to do that. Is that something that you're prepared to do?
Absolutely. When it was asked last time, we provided it within 21 days. We will provide it in the same format to this committee.
Okay. Thank you for that. I'm also mindful of the fact that Minister Duclos, in late spring, in addition to Minister Anand, was quite concerned about the level of contracting fraud with subcontractors and indicated that the initial 3 was simply the first wave of suspected fraudulent billing. He did indicate very clearly that there would be additional waves. So do I take that to mean the 4 additional referrals represent that additional wave?
My high-level understanding, we can get some details from Madame Poulin.
Thank you for the question. So the referral that has been made in October are 3. So there's 3 new cases, and this represents the second wave of fraudulent billing cases.
And will there be further waves? Are you still examining in fine detail from top to bottom any other potential criminality, particularly in contracting?
So let me start by answering this. It's going to be something that is evergreen, ongoing. So we look for the best ways to inform Canadians and parliamentarians on it, but to think that it's one wave after another, as I indicated, we do 400,000 procurement transactions a year. We've started to really review it using data analytics. We have, since 2022, now found a total of 7 cases. We can talk about restitutions. It would be inconceivable to me not to think that we are going to continue to do this type of work and continue to uncover overbilling.
Okay. So dovetailing on the Auditor General's report, which provided some detailed examples of potential criminality, in my respective opinion, about certain contractors, GC Strategies, Government of Canada Strategies, being one of them, Christian Firth, completely under RCMP investigation. In fact, it had his home raided the night before he was to testify at the bar of the House of Commons. He's definitely looking at fraudulent charges. So the question of recovery, there was a motion that was passed in the House towards the latter end of the last session, which demanded that the government provide details as to what steps they were taking for recovery. I have since asked a number of ministers through a very number of mediums as to what steps they're taking to recover, and I never get a clear answer, no answer at all. So, Ms. Reza, what instructions have you been given by Minister Duclos or any other minister or the Prime Minister or the PMO's office in terms of recovery efforts?
In terms of recovery efforts, we have made the commitment to the minister to look at how we can recover the funds that were spent on the contract. We have written to GC Strategies and other companies, as it relates to ArriveCan, to put them on notice that we're reviewing it and working with CBSA. CBSA is the client in this. We're helping them go through invoices. We're helping them to look at whether there was overbilling or fraud. Let me pause here. Est-ce que tu as quelque chose à rajouter?
No, I think the answer is completed. So each client department is responsible to recover the funds if they think they have been fraudulently overbilled or if they haven't received the service for which they pay for.
Thank you. That is the time, Mr. Brock. Moving on to Ms. Yip.
Could you tell us how long Diane Daly worked at PSPC?
That I would have to come back to you, Ms. Daly, unless one of my colleagues knows it. Ms. Daly, I believe, worked at PSPC until 2018. I think she started in 2008 as a senior procurement officer, and in 2018 she went on secondment, which is like going on an assignment in the government of Canada to go to CBSA. She recently returned to us midsummer 2023.
And what was the working relationship like with Ms. Daly?
I'm sorry, I'm not, I've never met Ms. Daly. I've never worked with her directly. I have no information. I don't know if any of my colleagues, if you would like to know what she does at PSPC in terms of her responsibilities.
Yes, happy to jump. So Mrs. Daly is a PG5. So and she was based, and before she was with the real property sector of our department. So with procurement.
And I think, we use the term classifications. The PG5 is a relatively senior officer, has authority to award contracts up to $30 million, to set up supplier arrangements. This is someone with a lot of training and expertise to offer. Beginning our second round, Mr. McCauley, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thanks, Chair. Witnesses, welcome. Ms. Reza, one of your previous appearances, you noted GC Strategies had been given a suspension for 180 days. As the 180 days is up, are they still suspended?
They are no longer eligible to do business with the Government of Canada. I think they're permanently removed.
So they've been permanently removed?
I'm just going to confirm this, so I don't... Vas-y.
Merci pour la question. From a contract security program, GC Strategies no longer hold a security clearance with the program. It means that they cannot access secure procurement on our side.
Access any other procurement?
I will turn to my colleague.
Thank you. They've been disqualified. So there was a breach of the Code of Conduct for Procurement. So they've been disqualified from all the supplier arrangements. So this usually apply across also all the departments. So.
How many companies similar to them have been suspended? Either or lost security and therefore cannot bid, or lost access because of misconduct?
Those that I'm aware, we have 3 companies. We have Dalian, Coradix, as well as GC Strategy. So those were the 3 that have been suspended. I would need to go back to the record in terms of providing you with an exact number and exact time frame. But since February, March, those were the 3 companies.
I would assume plus the companies involved with the ones that have been referred to the RCMP as well, have they not?
Perhaps I can take a crack at answering that. I wanted to distinguish that when it comes to overbilling and time theft, it is usually at the resource level. So the supplier, although through the Code of Conduct, they're held responsible.
So these are subcontractors that have been referred to the RCMP, and
the suppliers.
There are systems set up to ensure that these subcontractors are never.
So we're mapping out through, as I've indicated, this is a whole new set of, first is to find them, to refer them, to get restitution, and to put up, what is their requirement. They lose their security clearances. There's other elements to it, depending on whether it was an error, they're paying it back. So it's not a one-size-fits-all.
Thanks. And you did mention restitution. The comment to my colleague, Ms. Sinclair Deganay, was restitution agreements being negotiated. Why would we be negotiating restitution if they owe taxpayers money? Would it not be, you overbilled us, pay us back, period?
So as a result of the time theft, we've reached out to the suppliers. They themselves don't know. We've given them a methodology for the money they owe.
Okay.
We've started...
Sorry, let me stop you there. When you say you reached out Sorry, gentlemen. You say you reached out to suppliers about time theft. So this is money stolen from taxpayers. And you're saying they don't know. Why are we at the point of even having such a discussion? If we've identified time theft, therefore money stolen from taxpayers, should we not be just stating to these suppliers, here is the bill, pay us back immediately?
Do you want to take?
Thank you so much for the question. In fact, it's exactly what we have done. So
Okay,
we wrote them a
Let me
letter.
just stop you there then. You said that you're negotiating restitution agreements.
So this is the settlement agreement that goes with the payment. So we told them, please pay us that money. They are paying back, but they are putting legal condition on the confidentiality of the agreement, the fact that they are not agreeing to their liability. I think there's a specific word. They are saying, this do not constitute an admission of a liability, but because we want to keep our relationship with you, we understand that it's our responsibility as part of the contract. So here's your money. It's the full amount of the money that have been overbilled.
How is the government, from subcontractors, how is the government finding time theft, but the main contractor is not?
So
Like, I understand what you're saying, that the company is saying, well, we're not liable and, we're not admitting guilt, but if the time theft happened, did it not happen through the contractor, therefore billing the taxpayer?
So maybe I have to explain a little bit more what those overbilling cases are about. So it's individual. So people that through multiple contracts with multiple departments are concurrently billing the same hour of work.
Right, which sounds like fraud.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
and that's
let
why
me just stop you.
Quick
If it's
question,
fraud,
Mr. McCauley.
Why is this not going directly to the RCMP and the money being demanded back immediately instead of a negotiation?
So we should forget the word negotiation in that because they had paid back the entire amount. They're negotiating the terms of the settlement. These are two different concepts.
I'm stunned that
Thank you.
people are frauding us,
Thank
but we're giving them
Thank you
terms.
very much, Mr.
Thanks.
McCauley. That is your time. Mr. Genuous, you're up. You have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Quick question to the officials to start off with. Ballpark, how much has the government lost as a result of contracting fraud in the last 9 years?
I don't think we have figures that go back 9 years. We can try to come back with an answer. We can tell you that from what we've seen in our referrals to the RCMP, we're at 4.5 million and counting.
I mean, that's in specific referrals to the RCMP, but we've talked about so many other practices that are fraudulent. Do you have a ballpark sense of how much has been lost as a result of misrepresentation, breaking of various kinds of rules?
Merci pour la question. I do not have such information.
Okay. If you can try to come back to the committee with that, I'll move on. The Arrive Scam contractor GC Strategies has gotten a lot of attention. Dalian has gotten comparatively less, even though Dalian is also a two-person company involved in the contract. They appear to have also done no actual work on the app. Dalian had been identified by the government as an Indigenous company, and they operated in joint venture with Corodex, which allowed Corodex, a larger non-Indigenous company, to get contracts under the Indigenous set-aside. Dalian has now, though, been removed from the Indigenous business list. Can our officials advise why Dalian was removed from the Indigenous business list? Were they never Indigenous? Did they cease to be Indigenous? What happened there?
Thank you very much for the question. I believe this was raised at OGO with my colleague Gina Wilson. She answered the question as they are the owner of the Indigenous Business Directory and is best placed to answer those questions of indigeneity. What I took from the testimony was that they no longer met the corporation structure.
Yeah, the testimony we heard from Indigenous Services officials was, quote, "We noted that Globe and Mail interviews with Dalian referred to changes in his corporation. That affected the 51% owned and controlled scenario. That was part of the reason we had to remove his business from the directory." So can I ask, is the Globe and Mail your usual source for information about who is and is not considered to be eligible for certain procurement programs?
Thank you very much for the question. In the case of the Indigenous service list or Indigenous business list, our source of authority on indigeneity and whether or not they can be on the list is ISK. We get our procurement
I guess what
authority-
I'm asking just is more generally, like, what was shocking to me about that testimony is it's like officials telling us, well, we pick up the Globe and Mail, we read it, and that's our source for information for deciding eligibility for these procurement programs. It seems to me like the government should have a way of getting information to verify procurement requirements rather than hoping that a shady contractor would make the mistake of revealing information to the newspaper. Does this strike you as kind of a flaw in the system?
Well, I can describe, if you permit, some of the work that we do before we do business with a vendor from a procurement perspective, if that's reasonable. We do.
Well, I guess I'm just looking for information about, like, the sources of information for this kind of verification.
What we can do is also, oftentimes, they're going to be referred to ISK. So our procurement officer, in the course of their business dealing, they're going to be proactively referring contract for post-award audit to ISK, and ISK will undertake those audits. Also, in the case of Dalian, it's interesting to note that the reason why they got suspended at first, also, irrespective of the IBD, was that they found themselves in a conflict of interest situation. So,
I agree there were other problems, but they were taken off that list. I'll just say on Indigenous procurement, very clearly we have the sort of Spider-Man meme happening where procurement officials are pointing at ISK and ISK is pointing back at procurement. I asked a question in the House about this, and it was your minister, the procurement minister, who responded to it. So I wonder if this is why Indigenous leaders are telling us the program is such a mess. It's because you have kind of this ministers' departments pointing at each other and not getting it done. On this point, I want to ask the Auditor General quickly. You've been asked by Indigenous leaders to investigate abuses of the Indigenous procurement program, abuses that Indigenous leaders say are rampant. Can you give us an update on your plans and prospective timelines around investigating the Indigenous procurement program?
So we have begun the work on the Indigenous procurement, and we're looking at either the fall of 2025, spring of 2026 to make that report public. I think it'll depend on access to information and timing. So, but it's in the works. It's begun.
Any way you can get that out, say by August of 2025? I think Indigenous leaders say that a majority of these contracts are problematic. So I think it's the sort of thing that Canadians might want to see before having to make any major decisions.
I don't think I have the parliamentary calendar committed to memory, but I do not believe Parliament sits in August, and Parliament needs to be sitting for me to be able to provide reports.
Thank you. That is the time.
So we've got Cameron McDonald and Antonio Utano on the one hand. There have been allegations as against Mindone, and all the reviews that you've done. I mean, can you give us a read from your perspective, given you've done a deeper dive than we have?
Mm-hmm. So I think I would start off by a general statement, and then I'll give you a bit more details. But when so much goes wrong, I think every layer of management has to take some responsibility for the significant weaknesses that we found, whether it be in procurement, contract management, project management, budget management, record keeping. So there's many layers, I think, of management that need to take responsibility here. But when it comes to who actually decided that GC Strategies was the right vendor, it's a question that we were not able to answer, but I can tell you that there was a contract requisition, which was the document that indicates that a contract should be issued, which was signed by the executive director over at CBSA. And I think every public servant needs to know when they exercise their delegated responsibility that signing your name to something comes with accountability and responsibility. And if you feel that you're being pressured or you're not at ease with signing that document, then you should raise that with your supervisors. There are mechanisms in place, and that you shouldn't sign something that you're uncomfortable signing. But in this case, the executive director signed the contract requisition.
I think the collective jaws of all concerned taxpayers hit the floor in your response to my colleague, Mr. McCauley, about the Government of Canada working with fraudsters to pay back illegally, in my view, obtained taxpayer funds. So I'm going to do a deeper dive on this. How did you distinguish between working with potential fraudsters and those individuals that you referred directly to the RCMP? What was the metric by which you determined I'll work with them on a civil basis versus a criminal basis?
Merci beaucoup pour la question, Monsieur le Président. Donc, en fait, il est important de mentionner
It's important to mention that investigations were carried out on the people who were subcontractors. Fraud and other criminal elements are linked to those people's actions. No criminal action was discovered with the prime contracts.
You're not a criminal investigator. You have responded to Mr. McCauley that the individuals you are working with in terms of a repayment agreement, having them sign a document that absolves them of any liability, any criminality, any responsibility. In essence, they chose intentionally to double, triple, perhaps quadruple time for the work that they did, and the government of Canada paid them for those services. That, by its very definition, Madame Poulin, is fraud. That's an intentional act to deprive the taxpayer of funds. How many of those subcontractors is the government of Canada working with currently? How many? Just the number.
Merci pour la question, Monsieur le Président. Donc,
Thank you for the question. Before we can conclude that there is fraud, we have to say that there is no prime contractor that submitted an invoice inaudible.
Was very specific and direct. How many subcontractors who doubled, tripled, quadrupled billing to the government of Canada are you working with in terms of repayment agreements? Just the number, please.
merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question. 0 is the answer.
Zero. Then who are you working with? And what agreements are you trying to have them sign and to repay?
So perhaps if you permit me to take a clarity on this, we have referred 7 cases to RCMP as we described. These are individuals, consultants, who have done time theft. We are negotiating or seeking a restitution from the prime. That is our contractual relationship. They are paying us back. The negotiation settlement agreement is with the prime, who's also been defrauded. We are not negotiating with the consultants. They're going right to the RCMP.
Okay, thanks for the clarification, Ms. Reza, because the impression that I received, and I'm sure taxpayers have received, is you're cutting brakes to potential fraudsters. So that is not the case. The government of Canada is not doing that. Where there is a suspicion of fraudulent activity or any criminal activity, you are defaulting to the RCMP. Is that correct?
Oui.
Okay. Those contractors that you're working with in terms of repayment agreements, how much money has been recovered?
Merci pour la question, Monsieur le Président. Donc,
Thank you for the question. We're talking about $800,000. $420,000 has been received. $380,000 is going to be paid, and we are simply awaiting payment.
There's more money coming, as we've noted in this committee before, or at OGO. It's a 4.5 defraud. We're not stopping at 800,000. We're just seeking restitution and building the capacity. What was in individual departments now is vested in PSPC to collect it.
Okay, 800,000 potentially in total. Half of that has been repaid, correct?
merci pour la question. Oui, on a reçu.
Yes, we've received about $400,000.
Cover the balance of the 800,000.
Donc, on a travaillé en étapes avec tout.
We've worked with the different suppliers. Some still have time to respond. I believe we're expecting final responses at the end of November.
Mr. Brock, I'll give you a few extra seconds next time to make up for it.
It was just mentioned after Mr. Brock's questions that those 7 have been referred to the RCMP, and the others have paid back, and you are still negotiating.
Let me start, if you permit, to give a little bit of a frame. We now have the data analytical tools to be able to do data mining across the Government of Canada.
I'm having difficulty hearing. No, that's okay.
So we started to go back, and we now have a new set of data analytical tools. We use all kinds of different software. We're now looking holistically across the Government of Canada to see where there is time fraud. We look at different contracts. We see the consultants underneath it. We see if they're working concurrently, for example, at the AG or PSPC, and we identify time fraud, and there's a methodology that goes with it. Those cases where we see it's intentional, there's fraud, get referred to the RCMP. Since we started to do this work, Madame Poulin has referred about 7 cases to the RCMP. There also is an association of restitution. They owe us money for the time fraud. And again, we've started to go to the contractors. Our relationship is with the prime to indicate that you had a resource that was cleared, that was doing work, that was defrauding the Crown. You have put together a restitution package, as I noted earlier, before departments would go after the fraud individually. It was not an efficient way to do it. Under the leadership of Madame Poulin, she's put together a team to go out and negotiate, advise contractors who may not know, who don't know, I think has been your experience, that they're involved or the resources they've cleared or have working are involved in fraud. So we then negotiate to get the monies back. I think this started in about June, that this approach has been.
That process.
So there were 35 contractors that we reached out to. So I'm pleased to say that everybody has been. We have communicated with all the prime contractors, and some contractors have already agreed to pay. Some have said we will pay, and we're just awaiting for the payments. Some have asked to have a meeting with us because some wants to understand a little bit more what happened. And we have a couple that have said that they think they have no responsibilities within that and are basically refusing to pay right now. And we are waiting answers because we have given end date to some people. You have to respond by us in such date, and they still have time to respond. So nobody is behind their date to reply to us. In fact, we have a great success in getting answers back from those prime contractors.
I think it's important to note that we have a procurement code of conduct, and vendors have to abide by it. They have to act in good faith. They can't be in conflict of interest. They can't be associated with any criminal, any act, labor violations, and we're holding them accountable to that. That's a really important distinction. That's what we're using to proceed with.
Mr. McCauley, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just want to get back to the issue I was chatting about before. Now, help me out here. How does PSPC discover that there's this time theft and the general contractor is not doing that? I would think, having done large projects with contractors, the prime contractor is responsible. So how is it that PSPC is finding this fraud and the contractors are not? And the follow-up is GC Strategies was the prime contractor, but we went after them for a time theft issue and suspended them, but we're not doing it to the other prime contractors who seem to be suffering through the same lack of principles. And just briefly get to it, please.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So it's important to note that each prime contractor hired the resource. So there's multiple prime contractors that have hired the same resource at the same time to work on different contracts. So each of them do not know that the other ones I have hired the same resource. So because we have access to information on those multiple contracts.
If multiple have hired the same person, if 3 of us have hired the same person for the same work, they're not getting the work. Like, how is the contractor not aware, hey, we've hired this person for 8 hours a day, we're not getting 8 hours of work out of them?
So maybe I could talk with, I think I grilled Madame Poulin on this when she first brought it to our attention. It's often these professional service contracts is on a as when needed basis. So they're not working, it's not necessarily transparent to the Crown or to the supplier. It's only through the invoice and the review of the work and the sign-off that then these issues come to light.
department's not aware they're getting robbed?
Thank you for the question. So, of course, there's an increased diligence that will need to be applied when looking at the work by the client.
Why now? Why are we just looking at this now? How is it with all the resources the government has? We have chief audit executives for every department who should be looking at risk assessments for large projects like this. How is it just now we're figuring this out?
What I can offer into that is that it's very hard because while they are a central repository for all contracts, there are no central repository for individual resources.
These groups across the whole breadth of government have been billing for services not provided, and every department is just cutting checks without verifying that this work has been done, that taxpayers have paid for. And if we did not have this Arrive scam issue come before us, we'd be sitting here right now unaware.
Just on
and I'm
that.
going to just finish up quickly. I have heard from CFOs who have approached me saying this is endemic through government, through big companies, large contracting companies, management consultants, where they are billing departments for the same work 3 times. Like CFOs have approached me. It seems to be widely known in the government that this is going on. Like, how is this possible?
Thank you for the question, Mr. President. It's what we are trying to do by doing those investigations. I find important to mention, however, that those investigations have started way before Arrive can. So the first investigation that has been referred to the RCMP has started in 2021.
But if it's so widespread, even the procurement ombudsman is looking at it. But we've found 7 out of how many tens and tens of thousands of contracts? We even have a term for it, like the bait and switch that the procurement ombudsman is looking into, and yet...
So we're conflating issues. Resource substitution is not time theft, right?
There is time theft going on.
And this is why we put the data analyticals. That's why we have done a total scrub. That's why we're working with every CFO in town. And that's why we also agree with what you're saying in the concept that if you're signing off on it, you need to have to make sure you're getting the goods. So there's an issue there, not just from the procurement lens, but throughout the project management and the FAA responsibilities.
It just seems throughout a whole government approach to being ripped off and poor oversight. It just seems like, and I'm expressing some frustration and also disbelief, because there's a lot of parliamentarians, probably a lot of people watching, have business background where they actually have to check that the work is being done that we've paid for, even if it's gone through a major contractor.
Thank you, Mr. Gall. If you, I'll allow a reply if you have a brief one. So no, I think thank you very much. Beginning now our 4th and final round, Mr. Brock, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
So let's recap for Canadians some of the important details of this scandal. We have former Minister of Public Safety Mendicino, who is on record saying he wanted someone's head on a platter in terms of who chose GC Strategies. We have Min Doan, a former senior executive at CBSA, who deleted 4 years' worth of emails 3 days after an ATIP requesting information on GC Strategies was received by the CBSA. We have the highest level at both CBSA and PSPC involved in what was supposed to be an independent investigation. We've had senior officials appointed by our very own Prime Minister come to these committees and mislead, if not outright lie to committee. We have all the hallmarks of a cover-up and scapegoating going on in front of us. And I say that because I'm mindful of Ms. Hogan's, the other general's comments, that there are multiple layers of responsibility here. But I guess I can ask anyone at PSPC here, has anyone been suspended or fired in relation to the mishandling of the Arrive Can scandal? Yes or no?
we can only speak to the PSPC department,
Yes.
and nobody has been fired. or
Didn't
suspended.
surprise me at all. So what we have is we have two individuals, two mid-level to lower individuals at CBSA, Cameron McDonald, Antonio Utano, who have been scapegoated by the CBSA into accepting responsibility for the multiple problems exposed by this at least $60 million scandal, according to the Auditor General. It could be substantially more, but because of the abysmal paperwork at the CBSA and PSPC, she could only offer a guesstimate. So those two individuals had been suspended, at one point suspended without pay. No one else has been suspended, no one else has been terminated, no one else has been outright fired for their incompetence in handling this particular scandal. Now, I want to spend some time on Mindone. Ms. Hogan, were you made aware prior to the release of the ArriveCan report that there was 4 years of missing emails from a senior CBSA executive, Mindone, prior to publishing that report?
So yes, my audit team was made aware of the fact that there were emails that were no longer recoverable, and I think there are many reasons why emails aren't available. My fundamental view is that a contracting file should be complete, and a public servant should ensure that everything that needs to be maintained is in the contracting file, not in transitory documents.
And if I could stop you right there, Mindone testified at committee. He lied several times at committee and claims, given his senior level and his experience with computers, that he had to change the battery on his laptop, and mysteriously, 4 years' worth of emails disappeared. And therefore, he was unable to confirm through documentary evidence that it was he and he alone that made the ultimate decision to hire the pariah GC Strategies, who fleeced the taxpayer to the tune of almost $60 million. Now, do you view, as the Auditor General, the act of deletion of emails to be a policy breach by the CBSA?
Yes. Yes, I think if emails are of value to government business, they should not be deleted. They should be, in fact, saved to demonstrate due diligence and accountability.
And would you view that, in the normal course of your duties as an Auditor General, as rising to the level of suspicion, which is your mandate, suspicion of criminality, warranting a referral to the RCMP to investigate Mindone?
So I think this situation with ArriveCan was very unique. The RCMP was already investigating the branch at the CBSA and many of the actors, and that's why I did not make any referrals, but we have been cooperating with the RCMP and will continue to do so.
Okay. Have you cooperated to the extent of raising suspicion about 4 years' worth of emails being deleted by Mindone, someone whose specialty is computers and would have the responsibility, one of his mandates, to preserve that level of evidence? Have you made that referral to the RCMP, yes or no?
So out of respect for the ongoing investigation and the RCMP, I prefer not to comment on the conversations that we've been having with them about
Thank you very much. That is your time. I understand we'll come back to Mr. Brock.
When can we expect the investigation to be completed?
I can only speak for what we are doing at PSPC. So I'm sure you are aware that the main investigation is under the responsibility of CBSA. At PSPC, we have some internal investigation, one of which covering a departmental employee, and we are in the final stage of that investigation.
A.G. Hogan, can you update us on the progress of the GC Strategies audit that you're doing right now? Or Mr. Hayes?
Yep, thank you. So we have started that audit. We've signaled to the central agencies that we are doing it, and indeed, I have to acknowledge that we're very happy with the collaboration we're receiving from Public Service Procurement Canada on this. At this point, we're identifying how far back we're going to be able to go on the basis of the records that are retained by government. Of course, there are document retention policies. There might not be things much.
The one retaining those documents, I guess, but
We're looking across the entire government at the records that are retained, and of course we will expand to Crown corporations. It's a little bit more complex to get all of the Crown corporations because they are individuals. So we will be reaching out to them in the near future. Obviously, we recognize that there's great interest in understanding the universe of contracts that were awarded to GC Strategies, their principals, and any other derivatives. So we're going to try to accelerate that work as much as we can.
ballpark finish date?
We're hoping to have some information that would be valuable to Parliament as soon as possible. We recognize the time pressures that parliamentarians are looking at.
Thanks. Mr. President, I just want to get back again to, as you probably imagine, this issue with the main contractors, I guess, being robbed by their subcontractors and therefore the taxpayers getting ripped off. Just curious, like, what are the departments saying when they are finding out that they're paying for services that haven't been delivered? And what are these general contractors saying?
Well, I can tell you that PSBC, I think, was one of the defrauded departments, and I'm very interested to understand, when you're signing an invoice and you're signing off that you've received the goods, is there an issue that is overestimated? Is it an issue that, they're working 10, 12-hour days? It's getting to the bottom line and reinforcing, because this is about project management and it's about financial controls. It is not necessarily a procurement issue. It is the technical authority.
The general contractors who, say you've got three of them, each getting billed 8 hours a day by one person, like, how are they justifying it? Like, how are they justifying it to the departments and therefore the taxpayers? I've been paying out money on your behalf for work that hasn't been done.
Thank you for the question. So, important to mention once again that each prime contractor only bill once for that resource. So the resource is being billed by another prime contractor to another department. So
right. But somewhere along the lines, if one scam artist is billing the taxpayers 24 hours to three different contractors, we are not getting 24 hours of work. So how is it the contractor is not aware, and how is it the departments are not aware? Because if you look at the work being done right now on, say, Center Block, if you hire a carpenter to do X amount of work, he can't be billing for 24 hours of work for what is obviously just 8 hours. How is this slipping by not only the contractors, but also the departments?
Thank you so much for the question. So, as you mentioned, it's not arriving with carpenters. So that's why all those fraudulent billing arrive in professional services and IT professional services. So again, each department, is looking at its own view, and each prime contractor.
Yes, but what you seem to be missing is these contractors are paying out for work that is not being done.
I would agree with you.
Right. So why are these contractors doing it? This is the contractors either defrauding government or being completely negligent, in which case they should be fired or banned from doing work with government. How is this going on, and why have we not terminated these contractors?
I think, the resources. Often the prime is unaware because, again, it goes back to some of the issues we've seen in our ICANN. If the deliverables aren't tight, if it's not clear, the contractor themselves may not know, and if the bill is being submitted, the invoice, and the department setting up. What you're pointing to is an issue, 100%. So from a procurement perspective, we're going after restitution. How we educate the contractors, because it's also their responsibility, as I've alluded to, they have a code of conduct. I'm saying it's the responsibility of contractors.
Thank you. Mr. McCauley, that is your time.
It's also the responsibility of the Crown to make sure they're signing off and getting the value.
Okay, yeah, I think you got the answer. Very good.
Have you been contacted by the RCMP at all?
So our responsibility is when we find element of criminality in a case is to refer that to the RCMP. After that, they are responsible for the file, and it's with them to decide the next step into the case.
Okay, so not in any situation has the RCMP contacted yourselves, right? It's just in this case that you have reported to the RCMP.
Yes, so we're reporting to the RCMP. If they have questions on file, they can come to us afterwards. They have a direct contact with the investigative team. I will not be aware of those situations because they have access directly to the investigative team.
And if I could add, outside of like file specific, and there are obviously some other elements to it, PSBC, the Competition Bureau, and the RCMP run a tip line for contractors. It's a very important tip line. We've seen an increase. We advertise it. We look at it. It's an opportunity where there's wrongdoing, fraud, integrity issues for people to report. So we have a very close relationship with partners in this area.
You wouldn't have the number for the tip line to tell us all now, would you?
For the question, I will have to come back to you. We have quarterly dashboard, but unfortunately, I didn't think of bringing one with me. But we are monitoring that tip line and reporting on the nature of those tips. Are we seeing trends? Is there valuable information that can be actioned through those tips? So we're paying great attention, and we have colorful dashboard. But I do not have this with me at the moment. I'm sorry.
Thank you.